Hello and welcome to our next session of Mosaic Art. I hope you're all well. I hope you had a good week. I hope you can join us at Expressions Cafe in Walsall as soon as we open. We are at 73 Bridge Street in Walsall Town Centre, and we do our Mosaic art classes every Monday from 1 o'clock until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd love to see you there. For this session, I'm using an offcut of Wediboard. This is what it's called in the USA normally. It's a kind of cement board. It is available in the UK. It comes in under different names as well. Different names for it is Wediboard, Jacoboard, Duckerboard, Marmox. If you type it in on Google, you can find pictures of it and find possibly suppliers in the UK. I got this particular board from my local tile shop in Bloxwich. I just had to order it in advance. It's very cost effective and it's very lightweight and can be easily cut to shape, as you can see, with just an ordinary Stanley knife or even a kitchen knife. You can sand it down after, you can sand the edges down to smooth it down. Basically, it's a sandwich with a kind of foam in the middle and then a layer of plastic mesh and then a layer of cement. So that's on both sides. The one side is quite smooth, the other side is a bit rougher. You want to work on the rougher side of your board because then you will have more grip for your tile adhesive. But this is an offcut I had at home, and it's really great for small projects. It's very lightweight, easy to handle. You will probably need some kind of frame for it. It's easy to make a wooden frame and attach it onto your board for your final project. It can be used for outdoors, for outdoor mosaics. You just want to make sure that you use good quality cement-based tile adhesive. In this case, I'm just using ordinary tile adhesive. And my theme will be this standing stork. I'm just using this picture as a reference. It's a picture that I found on the internet. And I'm just going to do my drawing first on a piece of paper, just to get a feel of my design and how it will fit into my surface. Now obviously this design is it's a photo of a sculpture of a metal ornament, and it has quite a lot of detail on it, but I'm just going to use this as a reference. Initially, I was just going to do an outline of the figure in just one color, but in the end, I used just 3 different shades of blue, just to make it a little bit more interesting. I just wanted to mention as well that if you find a picture of a mosaic on the internet that you would like to copy, make sure it's okay to do that, because sometimes artists, mosaic artists as well as painters, actually have a copyright on their work, and sometimes you have to ask permission from the artist or from the website to do a copy of their mosaic. Or if you do publish any photos of your copied mosaic, make sure you put it on there that it's a copy of somebody else's work. In this case, obviously, I don't have an issue because I'm just using a photo of something, and I'm going to make something that's going to be very different to the original work. But that's just something to keep in mind. If you're not very confident in doing a drawing of your desired design, you can always just use that photocopy and trace it onto your final surface. You can use carbon paper, which is still available in shops and online, or you could even cut out your figure and then use that cut out to outline it onto your surface. So there's always ways to simple ways to transfer a design onto your final surface. I enjoy drawing, so I use that as an opportunity every time I do a project, no matter how small it is. I try to use that as an opportunity to do a little bit of drawing, and hopefully with every drawing that I do, with every project that I do, I can improve a little bit and become more confident in what I do. If you've never done drawing before and you find it intimidating, you can just have a go. Nothing's going to happen if it comes out wrong. Just have a go, see how you feel, and then you can always use a ruler to measure what you've done. And then when you're confident enough, you can transfer your design onto your final surface. In this case, I'm using a Sharpie. It is a rough surface, and obviously it's cement, so it's porous, so you will need a good felt tip that can draw onto your Wediboard. Now, ideally, I would have made a kind of frame for this project, but unfortunately, I didn't have the right type of wood available for this week. So I could have shown you how to make a wood frame as well. Maybe in the future I can show you that. This is just going to be a little project that I'm going to display in my house, or even bring it to the cafe when it opens again. So it's okay if it doesn't have a frame, but if you want to make something like this for somebody else or sell it, then you need to think about how you're going to support this type of board, because the edges are quite brittle, and your tiles will fall off basically. You can use the tile adhesive to smooth out the edges, which is what I've done, but it's just not 100% durable. The glass that I'm using for this project again is glass that I already had available at home. This particular glass is handmade smalty. It's called smalty. It's handmade in Greece by a friend of mine, and this one is in different shades of orange and kind of watermelon red. You can't see very well on the video, but it's a lovely kind of color. And these nippers that I'm using, these cutters, are ideal for this type of glass. This glass is quite hard, and if you use a good pair of cutters like these, it will make your work much more enjoyable and easier. Also, I have mentioned before that when you cut your glass, you want to think about the waste as well. So try to cut the glass or your tiles in such a way that you can minimize waste, especially if you've bought something that you felt was quite pricey. It's important to think about how you will cut your pieces so that you don't have a lot of offcuts left over. In this case, I decided to cut the glass sideways because that was giving me a nice width for my outline. There's lots of other things that you can use to make a mosaic, anything from buttons, flat beads, broken CDs. Some people like to use coins or washers or screws or anything like that. Just keep in mind that if you do use metal, the color might change over time. I remember seeing a mosaic once, or a piece of artwork completely made out of pennies, English pennies. And the pennies were, some of them were new, some of them were old, so some of them were very shiny and bright, and some of them were more corroded. And that gave that gave an amazing effect, but I'm not sure what's happened to this artwork now, because obviously metal corrodes over time and changes color. When you look at your money, when it's brand new, it's a certain color and it's very shiny, and after some time it goes darker and duller. So just keep that in mind if you're making something with metal. It's a good idea to use a proper metal varnish over it, because you don't want to have any unpleasant surprises after a couple of years. Also, I'm not sure how plastic would react after a few years, so it's really brilliant to use sorry, I'm just getting these messages on my phone and it's interrupting me. It's really great to use, to reuse and upcycle materials to make a mosaic, but I think for me it is important to use things that will last. So if you use buttons, for example, the colors are really nice and bright, but if you put something like that outdoors, especially in a country like the UK, the weather, the moisture, the UV rays of the sun will eventually change the color of the plastic, and your mosaic will be destroyed. And I think the whole point of mosaics initially was to make something that would last, something that would not discolor. So obviously people were painting the walls, they were doing beautiful wall paintings, but then making a mosaic on the floor was a lot more durable. When you make a floor a mosaic floor, you know, with the natural stones or natural pebbles, the color will never change. The color will always be the same. And that's something that I love about mosaic art. But by all means, if you're experimenting, if you're just making something that you want to display in your house, you can just use anything that you feel comfortable with. So here I'm covering the edge with the tile adhesive. I suppose it's kind of like plaster or gypsum, so you can sand it down the next day. You know, it takes about 24 hours for the tile adhesive to dry properly. So you can use the tile adhesive to protect your edges. But like I said, that would only be suitable for something that you will display somewhere and it won't move that much. If you want to make something and send it to somebody or sell it, make sure that you make a proper frame for it. So I'm doing the outline first, just to make sure that I have enough space left over for my main theme, which is my standing stork. And then for the main theme, for my stork, I picked a beautiful blue. It's a shame you can't see the proper color on the video. It's a very beautiful deep blue, and the darker blue is in fact more transparent, so it's very shiny. The other blue is more like a silk texture. And I'm just using things that I have available at home. Like I said, you can use whatever you have available. The basic tools that you need for making a mosaic, if you're just starting out, is you need a base. So it can either be wood, MDF, even chipboard if it's in a good state. Then you will need PVA glue if you're working on wood, or tile adhesive, which you can get in any DIY shop or even in supermarkets. Then obviously you will need your tiles or your other objects that you're going to stick onto your surface. And it's great to have a basic pair of tweezers and a little spatula if you're using tile adhesive, or if you're using a mortar, like a cement-based mortar or a lime-based mortar. When you're working on Wediboard, the best thing to use, I suppose, is a cement-based tile adhesive. You want it to be an adhesive, so you want to make sure that it's actually going to stick onto your surface. Don't be tempted to use just concrete, because concrete doesn't actually have adhesive properties. So it has the binders in it, but it won't stick onto any other surface properly. That's not what it's meant to be for. Also, just keep in mind, again, like I've mentioned before, when you do use any type of tile adhesive, read the instructions carefully before you begin. Make sure you use it within the time allocated, within the setting time of the project. So in this case, I have about 20 minutes, maybe half an hour maximum, to use my tile adhesive. After that, even though the tile adhesive might still be soft, it doesn't have the properties anymore. So it has already started setting. You know, there's a chemical process that's going on with tile adhesive, and after a certain time, when it starts drying, it starts to set. And if you use it after that time, your pieces might fall off a lot more easily. So I'm not that keen on it, I have to say. I will try to get some tile adhesive that has that gives me more time to work. I don't like feeling rushed, you know, when I'm working. But usually the tile adhesive that you'll find readily available in a supermarket or a DIY shop will give you roughly about half an hour working time. So make sure you only apply the amount that you will be using in that time, and the rest you need to clean it up while it's still fresh. Otherwise, it will just make it more difficult for you after to clean up. So, as I've said before, a few basic tips. When you're working around a curve, you can cut your shapes at an angle on either side to create a kind of a trapezoid shape that will allow you to go around the curve, such as in this case you have the neck of the stork and leading to the head. So you will definitely need to cut your shapes a little bit to adjust them to follow that curve. For me, that's the easiest way to go around the curve when you're using squares or rectangles. Obviously, if you're using pebbles or much smaller pieces, that might not be necessary. It all comes with experience. The more you practice, the easier you will find it to do mosaics that have more complicated shapes and curves and things, and then you can do faces or animals with more detail, or, you know, anything else you can think of, really. I'm just using up some of the tile adhesive that I've already taken out of the tub. So you can always try to make full use of your product. You know, you want to minimize waste as much as possible. Sorry, that's my son in the background. You can also cut kind of curved shapes with these nippers. I find them really, really good. Again, you just need to practice a little bit how you're holding your nippers, but you can cut round shapes or kind of angled shapes. As usual, I'm wearing my gloves when I'm using tile adhesive. You want to protect your skin. I know it's tempting to not to use gloves because you can feel what you're doing a little bit better, but you need to wear gloves to protect your skin. Tile adhesive and cement in particular can be very harmful for your skin. You might not see it at first, but in the long run you will start having problems, and you might get a rash, or you know, dermatitis and things like that. PVA glue is fine as far as I know. And you can also get non-toxic PVA glue if you're working with children. You can get some kind of craft glue that is non-toxic. You could do something like this if you have children. You can make mosaics just with using colored card or colored paper, or they can even use things like sweets wrappers and any other, you know, colored fancy paper, wrapping paper, card, like shiny card and things like that. You can just cut lots of small pieces and let them do a mosaic with paper, and that's a lot of fun as well. Or you can just do that yourself, even if you don't have young children in the house. There's also a kind of spongy type of tile that you can find online, and those are suitable for children as well. They can be used with, you can just cut them into shape with scissors. That kind of thing is great if you have problems with your wrist and you don't want to use any force on your wrist, you know, to cut glass tiles or ceramic tiles. That would be another option for you, either that or just using small glass nuggets and things like that, and then you could just make a simple mosaic without any cutting involved. As always, please be very careful with the glass. When you're cutting glass, protect your hands as much as you can. Make sure you work over the table surface, or cut your glass or your any other tiles, cut them in a bowl or something like that, so that you don't have glass or ceramic flying everywhere. I'm a bit messy, as you can see on the video. Obviously, you should avoid eating when you're working with tile adhesive or even PVA glue or any other type of mortar. It's okay to have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, but it's good to keep it like in a flask with the lid, or at least keep it at some distance from where you are working, because you can always get dust and things going in your drink. You don't want that. So I'm working in sections, a little bit at a time, a little bit of tile adhesive at a time, to make sure that it doesn't dry too fast. This took me, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 hours to make. The pieces are quite small, and I'm not a very fast worker, so everybody's different. Like I've said before, some people work really fast, some people just don't feel they have the patience to use very small pieces, so just do what suits you. This is for your inspiration, to give you ideas about different things that you can do, and I hope that it is inspiring you to just start doing something completely different. I've used the lighter orange in the middle, as you can see so far. I wanted to give the effect of a brighter background all around my stork. So all around my theme, I wanted it to pop out more, and then I've used a mix of darker reds for the outline. Like I said, these are handmade pieces of glass. So there's, I have a friend in Greece who, I don't think he's in business anymore, but he was self-taught for the most part. So he worked with somebody who was very experienced in mosaic art and glass fusing as well. And then he learned from this person how to make his own glass, which I think is really awesome. And he actually used recycled glass to make this colored glass that you see, not the blue, but the orange and red. So he got himself one of those machines that can make, you can throw glass bottles in there and things like that, and it crushes the glass, and then you get glass dust at the other end. And then he used the kiln. Obviously you need a specialized kiln to heat your glass up to a very high temperature. But for color, different metal oxides are used to give the different colors of glass. So it's all very, very interesting, and it really is a skill. And so unfortunately I don't think he's in business anymore, but it is a very special skill that is not very well known. This is how smalty glass is made, and like I said before, it's not only made in Italy, it's made in Russia and Greece, and I don't know, maybe even Spain and China, of course. There's lots of places where people know how to create smalty glass. The dark blue that you see is a different type of smalty that I'm using. It's more transparent, so it's very, very glossy. Whereas the other blue is, again, from Greece, from somebody else, handmade glass, and it has more of a silky texture to it, which is really nice. So it's not too shiny and it's not too matte either. These all work really well together. They're all classed as smalty glass. It is more expensive than the glass that we use at the cafe usually, but if you can get some of it, even just a small amount, it will really give a different character to your work. I've said this before as well, when you're shopping for mosaic materials, shop around. There's lots of online shops in the UK, if you are in the UK. There's lots of online shops that sell everything you need and more. You only need a few things to do mosaic art. You don't need to have fancy materials or fancy tools. The only thing that I would say is worth investing in is a good pair of cutters. But if you come to our classes, which we have every Monday, you can borrow some of my cutters. Normally they cost about 23 to maybe £25 each to get a pair of cutters, but it's well worth the money if mosaic art is something that you want to do long term. When you do any type of mosaic, my advice is to try and stagger your pieces so that you don't get continuous grout lines going across or going vertically. So you don't want your work to look like it's been cut or you know, made of pieces, different pieces put together. You want to have the right flow. Also, when you're working with fresh mortar or fresh tile adhesive, when you're cleaning, you need to be really, really gentle. You're not aiming to clean your work perfectly. You're just aiming to clean it enough so that it's easier to do the final cleaning at the end. So you want to remove the majority of tile adhesive from the top of your pieces, and then leave the rest of the cleaning for the next day at least, when your tile adhesive has dried properly. By the way, what I'm using here is 2-in-1, so it's tile adhesive and grout, but you can get those things separately. So you can get the tile adhesive, use the tile adhesive, and then when that's dry, grout your work if that's what you want to do. Just make sure that you always read the instructions very carefully before you begin. Get all your tools together so you don't have to keep getting up all the time. You know, just get a little bit organized before you begin, and it'll be more enjoyable when you're working. Another tip is to cut lots and lots of pieces of the colors that you need, all the different shades that you need, so that when you're in that mood and you're feeling really creative and you just want to start sticking pieces down, you've got all your pieces ready. That saves time, and it makes the mosaic making a bit more rewarding, I think. Another thing is, when you finish your work, say the next day, if you realize that you've changed your mind about a part of it, or there's not enough grout or adhesive somewhere, you can always add some adhesive on top. It's a good idea to wet it with a brush slightly and then put your additional adhesive on top. That just helps it to stick better onto the dried adhesive. And if you want to remove any pieces, the tweezers are actually very, very useful for that, because they're very fine. So you can use the tweezers to dig out one or two pieces that you're not sure about. But obviously it would be a lot more work to change the whole area if you change your mind. So it's worth spending a bit of extra time planning your project before you actually begin to stick pieces down. For this particular tile adhesive I'm using, I've got half an hour, in fact 20 minutes to move my pieces around, so I'm trying to be very careful not to go over that time, and also to clean all around, like I said before. Obviously the glass or the whatever tile you're using is going to add a little bit of weight to your work, but that's okay, because this Wediboard, this kind of cement board, is very, very lightweight. So even if you're doing a very large project, say 50 centimeters by centimeters, it will still have a good weight. It won't be too heavy. Whereas if you're working on wood, or sometimes people work on a ceramic tile, that makes your work much heavier, which might be an issue for shipping and transporting and things like that. There's lots of resources online if you want to learn more about mosaic art. Obviously, you can just go on Google and type in mosaic art, but there are also lots of professional websites that you can find online for advice. There's obviously lots of books out there as well. Maybe that's something we can talk about at another video. You will see the finished project in a few minutes. I hope you are enjoying my videos. I'm not a professional at making videos, so this is the best I can do at the moment. Hopefully I will improve in time. Another little tip with mosaics, this is my personal opinion, is that you can use your tweezers as a guide for the distances between your tiles. So the gaps between your tiles, the fancy word for that is interstitches. And as a rule, you could, if you wanted to look kind of more uniform, you can use your tiles, so the thickness, you can use your tweezers, to measure the thickness of your gaps, to measure the width of your gaps. Some people don't mind if the gaps are really big, but I personally like them to be, like the pieces to be quite close to each other. When your gaps are really large, then I think that that takes away from the picture that you're trying to create. Really, you want your gaps to be as small as possible, and that's why some mosaic artists like to work without any grout, so they make sure that they use the right base and the right kind of adhesive to be able to stick the pieces down really, really close together, like I did in the last video. And then you get the full effect of the color of the glass, shall we say. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the times we paint the mosaics over when we finish. That's not because the glass is not good enough, it's just to minimize that effect of the color of the grout. And of course you can get grout in different colors, so a black grout would have a completely different effect on your mosaic than a white grout. And that's another thing that you can experiment on in the future, or you can even color your own grout. So we've talked about this before, where you can actually add some paint to your grout while you're mixing it. Other things we have used as well is sand, so you can actually use PVA glue mixed with sand and make that into a paste and use that as grout, and that gives a very interesting texture, and it's nice for things like if you're doing, say, a person and you want the skin tones to be more effective, or if you are doing something with natural stone, then it gives a really nice rustic effect. If you use that, you just have to make sure that you wipe it off as much as possible before the glue dries, otherwise it's going to be really difficult to clean it after. Some people have even used tiny beads mixed with grout to grout the interstitches or the gaps between the tiles. So, you know, you can just, again, use your imagination and do different things. Use whatever you have available at home. If you're not confident with cutting glass, you can just use much larger pieces. You know, you don't have to do a mosaic that has a lot of detail on it. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but depending on the materials that you are using, you might want to think about how you will cut your pieces so that you can minimize the waste that you get. So, for example, if I decided now to cut triangles out of this type of glass, I would probably get a lot of waste. So I always try to do what comes naturally, so to speak. So for this shape, it was made more sense to cut the pieces the way I am now, so that I have minimal waste. And that's important when you're using something that's that you paid a lot of money for. I have also seen wooden tiles, so actual tiles. They look like normal tiles, but they're actually made of wood. That's something very interesting to use, but I'm not sure how the tile adhesive would react to that long term. So you might want to go over them with some PVA glue first to seal the wood before you glue them onto anything, and obviously that would not be suitable for outdoors. Other things are like, I don't know, you might have some leftover pieces from board games or little bits like that you might see in the house and think, oh, you know, I could use those to make a mosaic. As long as they are flat enough to stay in position, then you can use them for an indoor mosaic. This type of this technique of making a mosaic, so working directly onto your surface, it won't give you a very flat effect. So if you are after a flat effect, there's two things you can do. One is make sure that you're using glass that is exactly the same thickness, glass or any other type of tile. The other thing you can do is, if your work is already framed, you can tap it with a trowel or a piece of flat wood while your adhesive is still fresh. So while the adhesive is still soft, you can tap the mosaic gently, and then that will give you a much smoother surface. In this case, I wasn't really bothered about that. I liked the idea of having something that looks rustic and kind of rough, but again, it all comes down to personal taste. And if you're making something for somebody, you know, you just think about what they like and what would go nice in their environment, in their house. not sure now, but I think that I'm just going to show you the finished mosaic in a minute, so you won't have to watch the whole process until it's all done. I did try to finish all of it in one day so that I could give it a chance to dry and then clean it up the next day. If you cut lots and lots of pieces of glass before you begin, and you try to cut them in different shapes as well, then that will speed up the process later on when you need narrower pieces or triangles or trapezoids. So that's a good idea as well. If you know that you're going to be doing intricate shapes, cut a few triangles, a few trapezoids, a few narrow rectangles, and then you will have a selection of different shapes ready for when you need them. Again, as a kind of general rule, you want to go all around your theme first. So you want to outline your main subject first. It doesn't really matter what kind of shapes you're using, if you're using pebbles or triangles or odd shapes. The easiest thing for you is to do your outline first. So you frame your work, then you do your main theme, and then you go around your figures or your subjects in the picture. So you follow that line first, and then you're left with the spaces in the background that are easier to manage, and then you can decide what direction your tiles will be going. For example, vertically or horizontally, or just odd, whatever you think suits your work. If you look at old mosaics, you will notice that, for example, Roman mosaics, you will notice that there's usually maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 lines of tiles going all around the main going all around the main theme of the mosaic. Sorry about that, I don't know what happened to the sound. So yeah, there are certain basic rules about mosaics that I think apply even in super modern mosaics. You know, one of those is just that it's easier for you to work around your theme, all around your theme, before you move on to the background. We talked about durability as well. I mean, a lot of works of art are made from very fragile materials or plastic or things that might not last for such a long time. So that's just something to think about when you're making something. So here is the finished mosaic. The next day, the tile adhesive was virtually dry. I mean, obviously the longer you leave it, the better it is for sanding, but it's very easy to sand it down to a nice smooth surface. It's a nice way to protect and cover your cement board. I just don't think that it's good enough for I don't know, for something that you want to display long term, for me anyway. I just didn't have the right materials to make the wooden frame in this case. But here you can just see one option of using leftover Wediboard. So I mentioned before, when you clean a mosaic, you don't need to use any detergents. Even if you're using glue, you should have used a glue that will break down with water, so such as PVA glue. When you use warm water, the PVA glue will turn into like a film, and then you can peel it off. If you've been using homemade glue with flour and honey, again, that will clean up very nicely just with water. That's something that we can maybe talk about another time, is making your own temporary glue. So just avoid any detergents for cleaning. Sometimes people have used vinegar, but it's not really the best thing, because no matter how well you rinse it off after, some of it will have stayed in the pores of your tile adhesive or mortar or grout or whatever. Different words for Wediboard, if you're having difficulty finding it, from what I see here in an article I found, is Jacoboard, Duckerboard, Marmox. It says they consist of a polystyrene core faced on one or both sides with mesh and cement, and you can cut them with a Stanley knife. I ordered mine from my local tile shop, and I paid £13 for a large piece of 60 centimeters by 1 meter 20. So it's very good value for money. Very lightweight. It can be used outdoors. Can be cut very easily. What else? What else do you want? It's really perfect for making mosaics. It's meant to be like kind of an insulation board. And it's ideal for tiling. So I'm cleaning the mosaic slowly and carefully. You can use your tweezers or a Stanley knife or a spatula to clean up any tile adhesive that's left over on the top of the tiles. Take your time at this stage. And then it's optional if you want to paint over the grout or not. Like I said before, you can use any watercolor, water-based color, watercolor, acrylic, gouache, poster paints, children's paints, anything you have available in the house. You can use pigments as well, mixed with a little bit of PVA glue, thinned in water obviously. That's also something that you can use. Just experiment with what you have available. Another very quick tip is, when you mix colors, start with your lighter color first and then add a little bit of dark. So you want to mix, in this case, a yellow with maybe a little bit of white, and then you gradually start mixing a little bit of red in. If you do it the other way around, so if you start with your dark color and then you start mixing light, it will take you longer and you will have to use a lot more light color to get to the color that you want. So that's just a little tip when you're mixing colors. Every paint is different. Some paints don't stay really well on the tile adhesive, so you just have to see what you have available and what works better for you. You can leave it to dry for a little bit before you give it a final clean. You see here the corner is not very neat, but this was just for the purposes of showing you how to complete your work. I hope you have enjoyed my video. I hope it has inspired you again to do something completely different. And I'm really looking forward to doing the next video and to see you next week. And hopefully see you in person as well at some point. Take care, and I will see you soon.